Hello and welcome to Math with Mrs. Hevrila. This is Mrs. Hevrila and today we're going to be working on Unit 4, Lesson 15. In this unit, we're still working with division, and today specifically, we were trying to make that connection between division and multiplication. And we used area and volume as our examples. So in our problems today, we're going to be working with area and volume. Problem number 1 says the area of a rectangular field is 7,480 square yards. If the width measures 55 square yards, what is the length of the field? So when I'm looking at this problem, I see a couple of keywords. I see the word area. I know that in order to find area, I have to do length times width. Okay, length times width gives me area. So then when I'm looking at it, I also see a number here. I know that the area is 7,480 square yards. I also know that the width is 55 yards. I need to know what is the length. So if I were to set this up, I know that the area is 7,480 square yards, and I know that the width over here is 55. So what I'm missing is the length. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Anytime I'm missing a factor like this, I can find it by doing the inverse operation. The inverse means the opposite. So in this case, I'll have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take the area, I'm going to divide it by the width, and that should give me the length. So my area is 7,480. I'll divide that by 55, and that is going to give me the length. So I'll set this up as a partial quotient. 7,480 is my dividend, so it goes inside, divided by 55. All right, when I do that, I am going to look at the first two digits. I see 74, and I know that 55 can fit into 74 one time. So I'll do 55 times 1, and I'll put that 55 under the 74. And then I see two empty spaces, an empty space under the 8 and an empty space under the 0. And I need to fill those empty spaces in, so I'll use these placeholders or zeros. But because I put two zeros here, it means over here in my equation, I have to put two zeros onto the one that I was multiplying, making it 100. So 55 times 100 is 5,500. Now I can go ahead and subtract that. Can't do 4 minus 5, so I'll turn this into a 6 and this into a 14. And then I'll get 9 and 1. I have 1,980 left over. Now, here I'm going to have to try to figure out again how many times can 55 fit in. And normally I would be underlining the first two digits, 19. But because 19 is smaller than 55, that means I'm going to have to underline the first three digits. And I have the number 198. And I know I have 55, so I'm just going to count by 55s. 55 plus 55 is going to give me 110. Plus another 55 is going to give me 165. And if I added another 55 to that, it would be too much. So I'm going to stop at 3. I'm going to say 55 times 3. And 55 times 3, I just did those 55 times tables, but if I were to do it a different way, decomposing, 50 times 3 is 150. 5 times 3 is 15. So 150 plus 15 is 165. When I do it this way, I see one space, so I need to add 1 0. meaning I'll add 1 0 over here to my 3, making it 30. Now I'll subtract again. When I subtract, I end up with 330. Now that I have 330, I'm going to have to figure out how many times 55 goes into 330. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with 55 times 10 off to the side here. So let me go ahead and do 55 times 10. And I know that's 550. That's going to be too much for me. So let me go ahead and cut it in half and do 55 times 5. If I'm cutting the 10 in half, then I'm also going to cut that 550 in half. Well, half of 500 is 250, half of 50 is 25, and 250 plus 25 is 275. So I'll go ahead and subtract 275, which is that 55 times 5. 5 more groups of 55. Let me go ahead and do that here. 55 times 5. When I subtract that, I cannot do 0 minus 5, so I'm going to cross out this 3 and make it a 2, and cross out my 0 and make it a 10. I have 5. Now I can't do 2 minus 7, so I'll cross out the 3 and make it a 2, and make the 2 over here a 12. And that's going to give me 12 minus 7, which is 5. Look at that. It looks like I have 55 left over. So how can I get 55? Well, I'll just do 55 times 1, which I know is 55. And that's going to leave me with 0. Now that I have the 0, I need to look at all of my partial quotients, the 100, the 30, the 5, the 1, and I need to add them all together to get my final answer. So when I do that, I end up with 136 as my final answer. 136. Make sure that you're showing all of your work on the page, and then when you get the 136, you're putting a box around it to indicate that that is your answer. And that 136 is representing the length of the field, 136 yards. Okay, we're going to move on to the second problem. For the second problem, we have a table here, and it says we need to complete the table to find the missing information. So we have volume, we have the length, the width, the height. And in each of these rows, we're missing something different. So in the top row, I'm missing the width. In the bottom row, I'm missing the volume. So what I know about volume is that it's very similar to area. Volume is length times width, just like area, but then also times height. So when I'm looking at my table, I'm going to be taking the length, the width, and the height and multiplying them all together to get 1,120. So for example, in this first one where I know that the volume is 1,120, I get that by doing 16 times the width times 5. Now I don't know what the width is, so I need to find the width. In order to find the width, I'm going to have to do a couple things. First thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to multiply together my 16 and 5 to figure out what that product is. Because once I have that product will multiply times my width to get my volume. So step 1 is to find that combined amount, 16 times 5. So I'll do 5 times 6 to get 30, placing the 0, carrying the 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So now I know that 80 times a mystery number is going to give me that 1,120. to figure that out, I'm going to have to take the 1,120 and do the inverse of multiplication, meaning the opposite. So I'll have to divide 1,120 divided by 80 to get my final answer. So let me go ahead and set that up. 1,120 divided by 80. I'm going to start by underlining the first two digits, and it's only 11. So now I know I need to look at the first three digits. And 80 can only go into 112 one time. So I'll do 80 times 1. And then I'll put 80 under that 112. But I see an open space here, so I'll fill it with a 0 and fill a 0 over here, starting with 800 to subtract. 80 times 10 gave me 800, and I'm going to subtract that from my 1,120, and that's going to leave me 320. So now I need to figure out how many times 80 can go into 320. Now I know 80 can't go into 32, so I can't do that whole underlining of the first two digits thing. I have to underline the whole number. I have to think about the whole number. Now I know that 80 is close to 100, but not quite 100. So that means that if I were counting by 100s, it would be 100, 200, 300, and then 400, with 4 being too much. So I'll do 3 just to be safe. I know that 8 times 3 is 24. And then because I have a 0 on 80, I'm going to add a 0 onto the 24. So I end up with 240 to subtract. I'm going to go ahead and subtract that now. 320 minus 40 is going to give me 80. Look at that, it's 80. So that means I have one more group of 80 here. So I'll go ahead and do 80 times 1 to get 80, subtract to 0. Now I have to look at all of my partial quotients here. I have a 10, a 3, and a 1. Adding those together, 10 plus 3 plus 1 gives me 14. So that mystery number is 14. I'm going to go ahead and fill 14 in on my chart. All right, for the next one, the next row, it looks like I have the length, the width, and the height. And all I need to do is multiply those together to find the missing volume. So I'll start by doing my length times my width to get my area. So 45 times 16. 6 times 5 is 30, so I'll place a 0 and carry the 3. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 is 27. So I'll place that down. Next, I need to do the 1. The 1 sits in the 10 place value, so my first number goes in the 10 place value, leaving the 1 open for this placeholder. Then 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 4 is 4. And I can add these two numbers together. And it looks like I ended up with 720 when I combine my length and my width. But now I have to combine the height. So I'm going to have to take that 720 and multiply it times the height of 27. So this 720 is the same as 45 times 16 times 27 here. So 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 2 is 14, so I'll place the 4 and carry the 1. 7 times 7 is 49, plus 1 is 50. Now I'm in my 10 place value, so I'll put a 0 in my 1s. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 2 is 4. And 2 times 7 is 14. go ahead and add these together. End up with 0, 4, 4, 9, and 1. So my volume is 19,440. Now, when I'm looking at my numbers here in my volume column, I see that the 19,000 is so much bigger than the volume I had in the first row. And that makes sense because when I'm looking at my length, my width, and my height in my first row, these numbers are all a lot smaller than the numbers in my second row. So it makes a lot of sense that that volume is going to be a lot bigger. The last thing that we have is number 3. We have a picture of a rectangular prism, or actually what looks like 2 rectangular prisms put together. It says Alana used 2 blocks to build this tower shown. And it's asking what's the total volume in cubic inches of the tower that she built. Now, because this is made up of 2 rectangles, the top rectangle and the bottom rectangle, that means I have to find the volume of rectangle 1 and the volume of rectangle 2, and then add those 2 volumes together. So I'm going to start by writing out the length, width, and height of the first rectangle. So the first rectangle has a length of 5, a width of 2, and a height of 4. The second rectangle has a length of 10, a width of 2, and a height of 4. Once I multiply these, I'll add them together to get the total volume. So to do this, I can just do 5 times 2, which is 10, and then 10 times 4, which is 40. For the second one, I can do 10 times 2, which is 20, and then 20 times 4, or 2 times 4, which is 8, and then put the 0 on the end, 80. Now that I have these 2 volumes, the volume for rectangular prism 1, the volume for rectangular prism 2, I'm going to combine those together to get the total volume. In order to combine, I'm going to go ahead and add them together. 80 plus 40, and that's going to give me 120, which means my answer is D. Make sure that when you're doing this one that you're showing me the work by showing me how you found the volume for the first rectangle, the volume for the second rectangle, and then combined those 2 rectangles by adding them together. And that's all we have for today. So be sure to check in next time for help with your homework.